Hello watch enthusiasts, and welcome to this second instalment of the Watch Chronicler highlights of Watches and Wonders, the Geneva-based watch show which was due to happen and is now happening virtually online. And a few pieces have been released in the hours, and it hasn't even been 24 hours since my last upload to YouTube, but a lot has changed, and a piece which I heard about before I go on to speaking about some of the amazing things which have come out recently, from JLC for example, and from Elang and Zerner, as well as an incredible set of Vacheron Constantin, is a piece from Piaget which I think is a game changer and something which just has to be discussed and has to be considered because it's one of the most revolutionary watches we've seen in recent years. Before I begin though with this second highlight video of Watches and Wonders, head over to watchchronicler.com, that's to say our website, to read full reviews and full articles about some of the most exciting watches from the show, to really give you an idea of what the best pieces released are and what you should be paying attention to in terms of being interesting, beautiful, or in the case of this Piaget, truly revolutionary. Now, the story of the watch which I'd like to speak about today actually began in 2018. I mean, you could say it started in 1957 when Piaget first released the Altiplano, an incredibly thin dress watch, which in many ways started this story of ultra-thin dress watches within Piaget as a brand speciality. But if we look closer to the modern day, the story of Piaget in recent years has been one of competition with Bulgari, and both have been producing extremely thin watches over the last few years, and whilst Piaget seemed to be on a path to success with their 900p, for example, being an unbelievably thin manually wound dress watch where even the dial was deconstructed to give more space within the watch to make the watch thinner, and then the later 910p, which increased the case diameter and added automatic winding around the edge of the movement, Bulgari seemed to have the edge with some very complicated and incredibly thin watches in recent years. But in 2018 at SIHH, the former name for Watches and Wonders when it used to be hosted in January, they released a watch which really surprised a lot of people, and this was the Altiplano Ultimate Concept. And the Ultimate Concept was a revised variant of the Altiplano for absolute thinness. And when I say absolute thinness, this watch was 41mm in diameter by only 2mm thick. That's not the movement, that's the case, the crystal, the dial, the whole lot. There was, however, a snag, and that was that even at the time and in the show, Piaget were very reluctant to allow anyone to handle the watch or wear it for fear of damaging it. And I must say I'm not surprised. And I don't think anyone believed that this watch was going to be a real release for people to purchase just a couple of years down the line, but Piaget have done it. Now, bearing in mind the fact that this watch is only 70% or so the thickness of a £1 coin, you can imagine the innovation needed to get a full manually wound movement, and let's not forget of a really high degree, bearing in mind the innovation and the history within Piaget of fine watchmaking, into a case of these dimensions. And the first thing they did, which was something seen on the 900p and the 910p as well, was the fact that this watch had it used the case itself as the base plate for the movement. So the movement was built out of the bottom of the case. So there's no case back as such, it's a monoblock construction where the crystal is the last thing on, which is then pressed into place on the front of the watch over the movement. And this goes far beyond really what you would expect and is an exercise in real brilliance. So, for example, the wheels within the gear train and within the movement itself have been reduced from 0.2mm high to 0.12mm high. The crystal, for example, instead of being 1mm thick, is only 0.2mm thick and is supported by the peaks of the movement to stop it from simply crumbling if pressed. Now, I'm not normally someone who likes skeletonized watches. I think that a lot of watch brands use them as an excuse to highlight a movement which isn't really worth it. But in this case, it absolutely is worth it, because this watch isn't skeletonized so much as the fact that it's built to have as little additional material as possible. And the reason why I say this is that if you look at the dial, for instance, you'll notice that placed at 12, it's actually lower than the mainspring. And that's why it's been placed in this particular position, so that it's out of the way, and so that it can take up the depth needed for a hand. That's to say only one hand, because the hour hand is a disc at the centre of the dial, where putting that on top of the movement would add additional thickness. Another detail I love is the fact that the balance wheel placed on the left-hand side of the movement is only attached on one side, so you can see it rotating in a unique way which you just don't see anywhere else. It is truly unique. Moving down from that exposed balance wheel, we come to the mainspring. And the mainspring isn't mounted within a normal spring barrel. It doesn't have a cover and it doesn't have a normal sort of drum around it. Instead, it's on a single ceramic ball bearing in the centre, which allows it to sit in this position without the usual components needed. And it's impressive that this watch runs at 4 Hz, but is still able to give a 40-hour power reserve. And it's not the smallest of watches at 41mm across, but that's still fantastically impressive considering the dimensions of this watch. And something which has been noted, but is perhaps not discussed enough, is the crown. Now, you will have noticed the fact that the crown is this sort of shape which slots into the case, and that's because a small crown simply wouldn't be the right size to be easily wound by fingers. So instead you have a unit which attaches to the side of the case to allow you to rotate that crown easily to wind the watch. But also there's a staggered stem, and by that I mean that the crown stem isn't of the normal form, so instead it runs up through the movement to control the hours and the minutes when you set the watch in a very different way to the way you would normally expect, which I think is something quite impressive. The finishing touch is the fact that the case is made from a cobalt alloy, which is strong enough to be used in such a thin case, and as a result using something like gold or even steel wouldn't have been an option. So this alloy was necessary to make it resilient enough. And this watch isn't a limited edition per se, instead it's a bespoke order only watch, so you have to put in a special request for the watch. Something important though to note is the fact that the price for this watch is fantastic, eye-watering, spectacular. It's 400,000 Swiss francs, and orders are already starting to be taken, in fact have been taken for about a month now. So it has been known about in the circles available or able to buy this watch. But for everyone else in my position, for example, or in a reader's position, or simply an enthusiast's position, it's an incredible piece of engineering, and I don't think will ever be beaten. But tell me what you think of this Piaget in the comments section below. Do you think this watch will ever be beaten for being the thinnest watch in the world, in terms of having a manually wound mechanical movement? I'll be curious to hear what you think. But stay tuned for further videos over the next few days, possibly more than one a day, if this goes well, to really catch all of the most interesting releases, and boy are there some exciting pieces coming up. So thank you very much for watching. This is Armand from WatchChronicle.com. Out.